10 Questions Live. This is our monthly discussion with innovators, interrupters, and just plain interesting lawyers. I'm here today live with Beth Heifetz. She's a partner in the Washington, D.C. office of Jones Day, and she's the head of the Issues and Appeals practice, but she's also leads up all the judicial clerk recruiting. And by judicial clerks, I'm talking SCOTUS clerks, and she's a former SCOTUS clerk herself. We've had an amazing response from readers. We have lots of questions, so I'm going to jump right into it and start with this question about, I guess, why clerks? What makes them so attractive? What do you think clerking does to build a better lawyer?
The clerks bring a tremendous base of knowledge that they've built up over the time of their clerking. You know, when you think about what the clerks are doing, they're reviewing cert petitions, all the petitions for review requesting that the Supreme Court hear the cases. And so each day they're looking at subject matters that range from ERISA to the First Amendment to habeas corpus, and they need to be up to speed on those bodies of law, and they need to quickly know how to get their arms around new issues and to write on them in a clear and crisp manner. And so they have really been working very hard over the course of their clerkships to refine very important skills as lawyers.
So obviously you did very well in law school to be able to be a clerk. And I wanted to know, did you want to become a clerk in law school? How did that? How did you decide you wanted to do that? And then how was it different, or I guess better maybe than you expected?
I did want to become a clerk in law school. When I first learned that that was an option for, for following graduation to be a clerk for a federal judge, it was something that interested me very much. I just liked the idea of getting to think about the law in the ways that judges do for another year or two after graduation from law school. I think it turned out to be way better than anything I could have imagined. It's hard for me to remember now what I imagined at that time, but I found it to be an opportunity to engage in legal issues, to think about legal issues, to see wonderful lawyers, and to work with judges and my co-clerks and really learn from them about how to think about the law and how to write better and how to think more clearly.
Then tell us a little bit about your clerkships. You started with Judge Mikva and then went to Justice Blackmun. That must have just been two incredible career and personality shaping experiences.
They both were wonderful experiences. I learned a lot from both of them. Sometimes in overlapping ways. I think I learned a lot about just being disciplined to sit down and do the work in front of me, disciplined to address the issues that needed to be addressed, not to address the issues that weren't weren't confronting me. And I think I also learned really important life lessons from them, just from watching how they conducted their lives. I learned, the importance of making time for family and friends and relaxation, and at the same time the importance of getting it right and working very hard to make sure that things came out right and the way they were supposed to be done. And I also learned just about being engaged in the community, finding ways to be a part of whatever community that they were in, that I was in, and in part to give back, in part to just to grow as a person and to help.
Now, when you finished your Supreme Court clerkship, you didn't go directly to Jones Day. How did you get to Jones Day, and how has it changed? How is the path from Supreme Court to a firm? Because I know you were with a boutique firm initially, but not to say it was too many years ago, but things have, of course, changed with recruiting. And you had said in our story, in the article, that there was not this giant pot of money for you. It was very different recruiting back then.
It was a very different time than it is now. When I came out of my clerkship, there really weren't well-established appellate practices at big firms. They were just beginning. There were a handful of wonderful small boutiques that did appellate work and other kinds of work that I found very interesting. And so I gravitated to one of those. But many of them didn't survive, and I found myself beginning to look for other opportunities. But there were not firms, perhaps there were firms starting to offer bonuses for Supreme Court clerks at that time, but no firm that I was speaking to. So I went from the small boutique firm to a Washington, D.C. based public interest organization, which was really wonderful, but I was more involved with overseeing large-scale litigation as opposed to actually doing it myself, and I missed it. I ended up at Jones Day because Jones Day called up when I was working at this public interest organization to ask if they could assist us on a pro bono basis with any of our cases, and they did. They came in, they did a fabulous job, and I so enjoyed and respected the lawyers from Jones Day that I had seen that I reached out to them many, many years ago when I was ready to go back into practice myself.
I just wanted to interject here that I'm going to ask a reader question, but if anyone who is out there right now has a question, please email that to ABA 10 questions live. No, 10 questions live at abajournal.com. That's what it is. So our reader question, is there any way a lawyer who can't land a coveted clerkship can hone similar skills?
Oh, I think that's a great question, and the answer is yes. When you begin practicing, really take the time to work with different people, because what I think happens as you begin your career is what you're really trying to do is find your own voice. And for me, the best way to find my own voice as a lawyer was to work with many different lawyers and with the judges I was fortunate enough to clerk for, to learn their voice and to see how they wrote and spoke and approached problems, and through seeing how they did it, to take from that what felt most natural and best for me and develop my own voice. So my advice is, in a nutshell, work with many different lawyers and try to learn from each of them and see what works for them and see how you can make that work for you.
Now, on the other side of that, we had someone write in with this question. If they are competitive for a clerkship and they're interviewing or they're starting a clerkship, how can that student or recent graduate add value to the judge that they'll be working with?
I think you want to know as much as you can in advance about the kinds of issues that are coming up in your court. There are some areas where you might expect more maritime law. There are some areas where you might expect more patent law issues. Get up to speed so that you're coming in on day one ready to hit the ground with some base of knowledge on that.
And in another reader question, is there any just general advice that you'd give to law school graduates since you're meeting so many new lawyers?
Probably there's a lot of advice I give. One thing is that while you want to be developing your skills from the very start, sometimes those opportunities for skill development don't happen at the most convenient times. You might be, and to really, when an opportunity comes your way, seize the opportunity. To really work on skill development. At the same time, part of your job as a lawyer is to be very aware of the details and to be very fixed on making sure that everything is done correctly, and to always keep that in mind even as you are working to develop your writing skills and focusing on some of the bigger legal issues presented in the matter before you.
So I wanted to move now to talk about mentoring and the mentoring that you received as a clerk and the mentoring that you offer now to the clerks that join the firm. I know that's a huge part of the appeal of Jones Day because, as I said in the intro to this month's interview, Jones Day has for 4 years recruited more clerks than any other firm in the nation. And also this past year, 10 former Supreme Court clerks have joined the firm, and that's over 1/4 of all available clerks. So obviously, there's a blend of awesome going on over there. And I wanted to ask you, when you made the decision to mentor, to be involved in the career development and the personal development of these lawyers, how did you have a plan for what you wanted to do, or how did you go about that?
I didn't have a plan. Probably I should have, but really what I did was think about the things that mattered to me when I was a new lawyer and even now. And then I spent a lot of time, and still do, I hope, listening to what our newest associates are telling me about what they're looking to do and how they see that they can add value. I mean, listening is a very big part of the job. But it really isn't something that I'm solely responsible for. Even in firms with formal mentorship programs, everybody at the firm needs to be mentoring the newest lawyers. I think it's a job of all the partners and the senior associates to reach out to the lawyers that they're working with to help them, to guide them, to be role models for. And I think that's really what makes mentorship successful in a firm, is if it's not siloed as one person's job or one set of people's jobs, but it's something that everyone in the firms takes very seriously.
I know that both the judges that you had worked with were important to you in different ways. Are there things that you learned from Judge Mikva and Justice Blackmun that you use in your mentoring of young people today?
I think so. But I think for me it was really I looked at them as great models for me, and the biggest takeaway I have from that is that the young lawyers should really be looking not just at a single mentor, but there's a lot of value in learning from many different people. Different people will have different approaches, different people will have faced different issues in their lives, they will have come from different backgrounds and be able to talk about different experiences. So it's really useful, I think, for young lawyers to not just focus on one person as the person they can learn from. There just are so many different people in law firms that can really help you in your career if you're open to it.
And I know that a big part of when you're a young lawyer looking to the lawyers that you will be working with to see, well, how do they live their lives? What types of things are they able to do outside of the office and opportunities they have in the office, which segues to work-life balance. And I wanted to just touch base with you about how you juggle that, because I know you're a mom to 2 kids and your husband has an incredibly high-profile career also. So you have a lot going on, and how do you juggle that? And do you have any tips for people looking to have a rich, full life, busy life like you do?
One thing is not to think that you can achieve a balance and then that balance will last for more than 10 days or 10 hours or 10 minutes. It's the balancing is happening all the time. There are going to be times when you're busier at work. There are going to be times when you need to be attentive at home, and you need to sort of figure out the flexibility to deal with the demands as they come up. I think it helps to, I've been fortunate to be at a firm that understands that people have lives as well as the need to respond to our clients. And I think that that's something that people should think about when they are looking for jobs after graduation from law school, is to look at the people at the firms and see what they're involved in and whether they seem to be able to respond to different things going on in their lives, and whether they're able to engage in community activities, whether that's something that the firm encourages. I think having a supportive firm is a big part of what has made it why I've been able to do what I've done, and having a strong and supportive family helps too.
So I wanted to I wanted to include the Detroit bankruptcy in this call because that is so fascinating, and I wanted you to be able to share with our listeners and readers a little bit more about what you did with that, and I guess what level, to what extent were former clerks involved in that work?
It really was an honor for us to be able to work on the Detroit bankruptcy. You know, we had many lawyers at Jones Day drawing on people with a lot of specialization. There were, obviously, it was a bankruptcy matter, so there were many talented bankruptcy lawyers and ERISA lawyers and many other specialties bringing their expertise to working on the the situation in Detroit. I came in with others from my group to work on some of the state and federal constitutional issues that arose in the bankruptcy. And we did briefing on those issues in the bankruptcy court, the district court, and in the Court of Appeals. I worked with a number of clerks on those cases, and they brought their writing skills and their thinking skills and their background in constitutional issues to it. And it really, we worked very well together to produce some terrific work for the city of Detroit.
Were there any surprises or new things that you got to try out? Or, I mean, I know it's just exciting to be able to be a part of something that's so relevant to real people.
It really is. It really is. It's a privilege to be able to help out in that way. You know, for many of us, this was our first involvement in a Chapter 9 bankruptcy, in a municipal bankruptcy, and there'd never been one of this size, of this magnitude before. So many of us had much to learn in that regard, and that was exciting. It was also so interesting to see what needed to be addressed and what needed to be respected in this bankruptcy, and how important civic treasures can be. One of the issues in the bankruptcy was what would happen to the art at the Detroit Institute of Arts, and in the end, that the art remains available for the people of the city of Detroit. But it was very interesting to watch that in play.
And may I ask what the status is of your involvement in the case?
The Detroit bankruptcy has the bankruptcy plan has been consummated. There still are some appeals pending in the Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit.
Now, how do you? I'm going back. I just thought of this. How do you work with the clerks to figure out where they'd be happiest in the firm? I remember we had talked in our initial interview that you work with them with geography and with practice group to make sure that they really can find their foundation moving forward.
Many of the people who we recruit from the Supreme Court want to be in the Washington, D.C. area, but occasionally some of them want to be elsewhere, and we are really happy with that. So we now have former clerks in our offices around the country, including in our newly opened Detroit office, and we are able to work across office lines without any issue, so that our lawyers in Chicago and our lawyers in Detroit and elsewhere can be working on the same kinds of matters that we are working on here in Washington, D.C. Most of our clerks come into our issues and appeals practice, the Supreme Court clerks in particular, but they often tend to find specialty areas that they minor in. That it's not a major focus, but a minor focus, to bring us back to the school metaphor. So we have clerks who are very interested in international arbitration, and they do some of that work from within issues and appeals. Same for people who are very interested in bankruptcy or in labor and employment. And I work with the lawyers who come here to help them develop the interests that they have and to try out some of those interests and see what works best for them.
So I also wanted to touch base with you about your work outside of the firm. I know that you are on the board of the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to ask you how you got involved in that. And I know that your family has been personally affected by the Holocaust. So I'd love to know more about that connection between the museum and your life.
I first became connected to the Holocaust Museum while I was doing some genealogical research for my family, and then went to an event at the Holocaust Museum, and it all kind of came together for me in that moment, and I saw this as an opportunity to learn more, not just about my family, but to learn more about what the Holocaust meant to so many people and what it could mean going forward. How one of the things that strikes me the most about the Holocaust Museum is that it's a living memorial and it's a museum. So we want to remember the Holocaust. We think it's very important for people to keep that history in mind, but also to build on it so that we can prevent genocides going forward. And the museum is really vital in that effort. It matters especially to me because we did lose a lot of family in the Holocaust. My grandparents were all in this country, but left behind families all of whom were killed during the Holocaust, with the exception of 2 great uncles who survived, living in hiding in the forest for several years during the Holocaust. And they lived and fought with the partisans, and it is hard when I even say the words that they lived for years in the forest to understand what that must have meant on a minute-by-minute and a daily basis. But they survived the Holocaust, they made their way to displaced persons camps, and then eventually one of my great uncles came to this country and lived down the street from me in Wisconsin, and my other great uncle moved to Israel at that time.
And didn't one of your great uncles meet his wife in the forest also?
He did. She too had survived the efforts she too had escaped when the Nazis came into her town to shoot all of the Jews. She had managed to run away from that horror, and she was in the forest, and she met my great uncle, who was also in the forest, and they were together in the forest and survived, and that is the great uncle who came with his wife and their then children to the United States and lived and worked down the street from me.
And I know that the museum, in addition to being a memorial, is really being proactive about education and trying to prevent genocides and, with the crazy current events going on. You're really, as part of that museum, instrumental in helping make sure it doesn't happen again.
That's right. That is a big part of the mission of the museum, and I think what is going on in the world with genocides and with issues about refugees, it makes the museum's work especially relevant now.
I just think your career is so fascinating. You're helping on so many levels, and you're showing not only your children but also the young lawyers that you work with how relevant, how being a great lawyer can affect the relevancy of everyday life for people across the world. So thank you for your work, and thank you for being part of our 10 questions today.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us. We're going to be archived on YouTube if you'd like to see this again or tell more people about it. And then we'll be here next month with Julianne Walsh, April 28th at 2 o'clock, and registration will open soon for that 10 Questions Live. Thank you so much.